So, you know those stickers you see on the backs of minivans or SUVs? The ones with the little stick figures of mom and dad and their kids and maybe a pet or two?
They're everywhere. I think I see them almost more than any other bumper sticker in Utah, including the 26.2 ones. If you have to ask, you're not cool enough to know. Am I right, runners? All that to say, Utahns love to brag about the fam.
And one of our friends in California kind of picked up on that vibe too.
Sophia Han.
Okay, and then are you a California native?
Yeah, Bay Area, San Jose.
Okay. When you hear Utah, what do you think of it? Like when you hear the state's name, like what do you think?
I think it's a place like family-friendly, family-oriented, suburban. I think Provo.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does play a role in that. Its religious leaders have encouraged moms to stay at home to take care of the fam bam.
But did you know that more than 60% of Utah women work for a paycheck?
I mean, even the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, they all got jobs. But some people might hear family-oriented and think that means women exclusively stay at home with the kids. I'm Sage Miller.
And I'm Sean Higgins. This week on State Street, we're focusing on working women.
Women are more than caretakers in Utah, but the support offered to them to balance both is where it gets a little thorny.
Focus on family, Utah helps each child to succeed. People care how they live. Each has so much to give. This is the place.
Wow, kind of a banger.
Definitely catchy, considering Utah's state song is perpetually stuck in my head.
But it says right in the lyrics, Utah has a focus on family. State leaders really care about the family unit.
Governor Spencer Cox even created an Office of Families in 2022. Family and children are also a big topic and motivator on Utah's Capitol Hill.
But for the 6th year in a row, Utah has ranked last for women's equality, according to an annual study done by WalletHub.
That's based on a number of metrics, like the gender pay gap, educational attainment, and political empowerment.
To help us dig into that a little more, we enlisted the help of someone who has dedicated their career to understanding how Utah can better support women.
I talked with Susan Madsen. She's the director and founder of the Utah Women and Leadership Project. Madsen is also a professor of business at Utah State University. She outlined why Utah is ranked last in women's equality and why some of these gaps exist in the first place. Okay, so diving into some issues that relate to your area of expertise. Utah is still ranked the worst in the nation for women in several areas, yet again. Why is that?
You know, there's different ways that we're ranked in terms of WalletHub and other kinds of rankings. So one of theirs is called Women's Equality. So the best and worst states for women's equality. And in that one, there really are 17 different metrics in 3 chunks. And one of those is 10 metrics in workplace environment. And that is one of the ones we're so low on. And that's because of things like the pay gap, women in executive positions, those kinds of things, women in leadership roles, even entrepreneurship, those things we just rank really poorly in the state of Utah. And as you know, Sage, we have heard for years about the pay gap, and I have to say we were always saying at least Wyoming was worse. And in the last year, we have shifted with Wyoming. We are now the worst in the nation on the pay gap.
And how large is that pay gap?
Well, nationally, it's about 83 cents that women make on the dollar. And in Utah, it's 71, 72, depending on what data you're looking at. And some people discount WalletHub, but my team has gone back to the original data sources of the U.S. Census, the U.S. Department of Labor, and on, and run the data ourselves, and it still tells us in our data that we are ranked as the worst state for women's equality.
And this year, the gap between Utah and the next state, which I believe is Texas, also widened. Why is that?
Absolutely. So there's a 100 points total. But 2 years ago, when we really started looking at this, we were 7 points behind Idaho. So Idaho was the second to the worst state. Last year, we were 12 points behind Georgia. Idaho had flipped up one. And this year, we're 22 points behind the next, and it's Texas. Other states are just making progress faster.
There are a lot of gender stereotypes about Utah, including that the majority of women with families are stay-at-home moms while the father brings home the bacon. How true does that ring?
In general, there are stay-at-home mothers, definitely. But what's amazing is that so many people really don't think that there's a lot of women who work full-time in the state of Utah. And what we know is actually there's a lot of women who work outside the home or inside the home for pay. When you look across the labor force in Utah, 44% are women. So that's a big percentage. And about 62% of women, more generally, are in the labor force of some kind. And even moms with kids under 62% of moms with children under the 6 years old are in the labor force. What we know from the data are that even more than the nation, we're slightly above in terms of women working for pay. We do know that we have slightly more women working part-time. And so that stereotype that most women do one thing and most men do another, I think we're mixing that up as we look at the demographic changes in the state of Utah. And honestly, Sage, a lot of times, people don't have the choice to stay at home and not work at all for money. I mean, housing costs, all kinds of things are taken into account.
In terms of gender roles, how has that evolved within about, let's say the last 20 years of women wanting to go back into the workforce rather than stay in the traditional caregiving roles for their family?
Well, I think that is changing through the years, not just in the state of Utah, but beyond. There's more single mothers than there used to be. So the demographics are changing more generally. But more and more women, especially once they're educated, if they, that maybe they don't, quote, need to go to work, actually want to. That's why it's so important that our companies provide different kinds of flexibility and some professional part-time roles. So it's not all or nothing.
As we have a large percentage in Utah of women entering into the workforce, what kind of work are they going into?
We do see in the state of Utah specifically that women do tend to stay in more female-dominated occupations. And so even though that's changing some, like women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, Utah is behind in terms of that compared to other states, but we're seeing slight increases in that. But you still generally see women in things like healthcare, in education, the K through 12, secondary education. The more women are in a field, the less pay. So if the field starts turning, let's just say elementary school teaching. If somehow more men came back into the field, the salaries would be pushed up. Men just don't deal with it. They just push it up. So as a field becomes more feminine, the salaries go down. As a field becomes more masculine, the salaries go up.
I hated that fact.
It's what happens. It's occupational segregation. And that's what it is. I mean, the caregiving, those kinds of things have never been valued as much. And another interesting piece, Sage, is that I have companies, even CEOs asking me or telling me sometimes that I'm welcoming to women. Like in engineering, we want more women. But what some don't understand is you can say things, but is the culture of the company still very masculine? Now, what's interesting about it is that culture is often invisible. I ask them, what does your culture look like if you're losing women? And they start talking. I'm like, that's because you have a masculine culture. And they're like, what? It's like a fish in water. You don't know you're in water. You don't see it. And so more and more companies are interested in digging into what that looks like. How do we help people feel more included, including women? And I would argue women of color and people of color as well. I mean, that's an issue there. If you don't see anybody that looks like you, even close, on gender and race, and I would add LGBTQ into that mix too, then you have to work really hard as a company to help create that inclusive culture in various ways.
That leads in pretty well to the next question, which can you point to any policy changes either at the state or the private company level that have bolstered support for women in the workforce?
The state has passed a few smaller things recently on childcare. They're not big, bold movements, but I'll tell you, there's two main things that are most important to women in the workforce here in the state of Utah. And one is flexibility. They want more flexibility so they can do the multiple things. And second is childcare. That's one of the biggest struggles. It's too expensive for a lot of people, yet childcare providers, some of them live in poverty. So when that's a market failure, meaning you can't charge enough to make a good living because parents can't afford that. And so there's this space where if there's not an intervention by public policy, it's just not going to work unless someone picks it up. Another area that many businesses have done is businesses pick that up and have childcare services on site or different kinds of things.
With all of these factors in play, Utah ranking the worst in the nation for women's equality yet again, even though there's more women entering the workforce, what does the future of working women look like in Utah?
Well, I always have hope, Sage. I always have a hope. Especially we have launched, not just we as in the Utah Women in Leadership Project, but we as in many organizations coming together, including companies, a movement called A Bolder Way Forward. We need to figure out how to move the needle. So more and more organizations and groups are coming together to say, let's all do pieces and support each other better, find the gaps and move forward. And some of those areas are in the labor force areas because there are women that are really struggling in this area. I not every woman struggles, right? I love being a woman. I love living in Utah, but there are definitely some changes that need to occur. I think with this Bolder Way Forward, with other things that are really happening in terms of women's leadership programming and different things with partners that we have, like the Women's Leadership Institute, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, YWCA. There are a lot of groups and government agencies really strategically thinking about how do we shift things so that women and girls can thrive. We want men to continue to thrive so that families can thrive more.
Thank you again so
Thank
much,
you.
Susan. I appreciate your time.
That was founder and director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, Susan Madsen.
We're going to take a quick break. When we're back, how one working mom is trying to strike a balance between her career and childcare. You're listening to State Street.
Support for State Street comes from the Hinckley Report podcast, a weekly roundtable discussion about the biggest political headlines in the Beehive State. Find new episodes of PBS Utah's The Hinckley Report every Friday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is State Street. I'm Sean Higgins.
And I'm Sage Miller. We just heard from Susan Madsen. She researches how Utah women are doing in the state and what could be done to better support them.
We learned that Utah is ranked last in the nation when it comes to women's equality, but more than 60% of Utah women are integrated into the workforce.
But they still make far less than their male counterparts and often have to leave the workforce because of the lack of maternity leave or the cost burden of childcare. So we spoke to one woman who's been dealing with all of this firsthand.
Najude Price is a mom and a speech pathologist.
She and her husband had a kid about 2 years ago, and she's been working part-time for over a year now.
I didn't quit, but I kind of disappeared. But I didn't have paid maternity leave, so I didn't feel like I had to go back. So when he was like 7, maybe 5, 6, 7 months, I can't remember, I was like, okay, I think I need something to do. I need to get out of the house more. I wanted to go back to work. So that's kind of when I started going back.
Do you remember kind of the exact moment or the feeling you had when you knew, like, I think I need to get back in the swing of a career space?
I don't think there was a specific moment. There was just kind of like little moments and lots of feelings. I kept thinking like, I really want new clothes because like my postpartum body was different and a lot of my clothes didn't fit, and I felt bad. Like I was buying so much new stuff and I was like, wait, I'm like not earning any money. Like I got a master's degree. I wanted to work because I worked really hard to get my master's degree, and I didn't want to just not use it. And I'm a pediatric speech therapist, and the field changes so much, and I feel like if I didn't work, I would have missed so much in just a couple of years. So it was really like a combination of things. And also like, I was like, I need to do something other than stay at home because I love my kid. But I also was like, I can't just be a mom all the time. I need to like have a social life and have friends and get out more.
You work about 2 days a week. How'd you land on that number?
2 days a week just seemed really chill. Like Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's all I do. I'm able to get out of the house. I work with a lot of people. I make a difference with lots of kids, but at the same time, like I'm primarily with my own kid, and I get to spend lots of time with him. So it felt like a good balance to me.
Did you face any kind of like barriers or obstacles getting back into work while also having to take care of your son?
The only obstacle I really faced was finding a daycare. Like so many daycares either had like a really long wait list. Some of them were like a year out, and I'm like, if I had a newborn and you're telling me there's like a wait list for a daycare, I'm like, am I supposed to reserve a spot before I'm even pregnant? Like, I don't understand. And then the other thing with daycare is so many places won't take infants part-time. Like I think they can only have a certain number of babies in a class, so it didn't make sense to have like a part-time kid. So I only had like 3 daycares that I could take him to, and one was like a maybe, and the other 2 were like, absolutely not, I'm not going to take my kid here. So I just took him to that one place, and he's still there, but honestly I don't like love the place, but it's really my only option. And we have family around, but they're not like down to be daycare, which I totally understand. Like they have their own lives and things to do, so that was never an expectation. But daycare was just like our only option, but it was really hard to find.
What kind of support would you have liked to seen from either your employer or the state to help you both be a mom and a working mom?
Definitely paid maternity leave. And I know like some people at my current job, they actually switched jobs because my current job also doesn't offer paid maternity leave, though they are like thinking about how to make it work. But it's a big deal. Like not everybody can afford to live on one income. I don't know, please Utah, give us paid maternity leave. And also I think it would be really cool if like our jobs had daycare, to just be able to go to work and check in on your kid and see them throughout the day. That would be so awesome. I would love that.
How do you think paid maternity leave would change your life?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. It would just make it a lot more affordable. Like I'm lucky enough that I didn't have to go back to work, but I do know it would change a lot of people's lives. Like some people, they have to work because they need like 2 incomes, or single moms need just, you know, a single income. Like that initial period when your baby is born, like you just have so much contact with your baby. You're always holding them. You're their primary caregiver. You're like all they know. And it's just really sad if somebody has to go back to work because they can't afford to stay home.
What are the conversations between you and your friends or you and your peers about childcare and childcare options?
I think we all think it really sucks. Like there's no like winning situation or perfect situation. Like daycare can be really expensive, especially if you're working full time. if they don't get paid very much, then they're like, well, it's actually not really worth it for me to work. Like, my pay barely covers childcare, or like after childcare, I'm making $100. So like, why work? I should just stay at home. I think mostly we just talk about how unfair it can all be, and like how people can like really judge. Like, you can be judged as a working mom, and you can be judged as a stay-at-home mom, and there's no like winning solution. Like, we all want to be the best moms that we can be, but I think this was while I was pregnant. Somebody said to me, she was like an older lady, but she was talking about how this like teenager was really rude, and she was like, I just think that's what happens when we don't have a parent at home. And I'm like, I didn't say anything, and I'm really bad like in the moment, like thinking of her response, but I'm like, no, like, I don't know why that girl was super rude, but like, I don't think it's because she didn't have a parent at home. Having a parent at home, or like not having a parent at home, doesn't mean that your kid is gonna be messed up. I don't know, it's really hard to decide what you want to do and feel okay about it. I think that's also partly why like I love working part-time, is because I feel like I have the best of both worlds. Like, I work, but I'm also the majority of the time a stay-at-home mom. I want to be able to spend time with him. Like, he's only this young once, and he's so cute and he's so precious, and I just want to be able to spend time with him when I can. I love the balance that I have right now.
That was Najude Price, a speech pathologist and working mom.
Utah parents are doing what they can to provide for their families while also maintaining their social lives and careers.
A good chunk of Utah's labor force is made up of women, but there are some barriers, like the lack of maternity leave and the high cost of childcare.
Yeah, like the cost of childcare being so high that in some cases it's not even worth it for both parents to work, because almost every extra penny would go toward that care.
Or the limits on the kind of childcare. It's hard to find part-time daycare for an infant child.
The legislature did pass a bill last session allowing for an additional $1,000 per child between the ages of 1 and 3.
But there's also a catch. The full amount is only open to households that make under $54,000 a year. And the average cost of full-time daycare in Utah is anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a month.
There is also the cultural side of things, too. Some stay-at-home parents might feel judged for making that choice. Some working parents can also feel judged by people who think someone should always be at home raising the kids.
You just can't win. So yes, getting back to the stereotype, Utah is family-oriented. And more women are working, either because they have to or because they want to.
They don't always have the best options available to them, though. I'm Sean Higgins.
And I'm Sage Miller. The show's executive producer is Caroline Ballard. Editing and production support comes from David Childs and KUER's news director, Elaine Clark.
Our digital team includes Jim Hill, Eleanor Gomberg, and Raquel Davis. And special thanks to Bijan Siavoji, who gathered audio for us in California.
State Street is a production of KUER. Just can't get enough of the show? Sign up for our newsletter for some behind-the-scenes content. And we'd love to hear what you think. Leave us a review wherever you're listening. See you next week. How's the song go?
Utah, with its focus on family, Utah helps each child succeed. I want to go home before dinner, Sage.
From KUER.